Welcome to the Introduction to Photoshop. We're going to start out with having a little bit of a discussion about some of the terms and how Photoshop is used and that sort of thing. And then we are going to have a second video that's going to be a tutorial. It's going to show you how to do the things that the lab assignment is asking for. So I want you to watch this video. The tutorial video, however, you can fast forward, you can stop the video, whatever you need to do to best use that material. So let's just go ahead and get started. There's two words here that you may or may not have ever heard, raster versus vector. So we're going to talk about these two so that we can get it all straight in our heads. So first thing is Photoshop is a raster file. If someone says, I need a raster file from you, then you know that they're asking for something that Photoshop produces. So let's go into raster just a little bit more. Photoshop is made up of pixels. If you get really super close to a photo, you will be able to see the little squares that make up the image. And so the image has a certain amount of pixels per inch or PPI. And however many they have determines the amount of resolution you have. For instance, on the web, you only need 72 PPI in order to have a clear image. If you're printing on a desktop printer at home or at your local copy center, you really should have your files at 150 PPI. And whenever you're doing a high quality print job, the resolution should be 300 PPI. And so here's a little rule of thumb that I always use. I create at a higher, I create it at 300. I create it at a higher pixel per inch than I might possibly need. But I try to make it for the largest thing that I will make because you can always save down to 150 or 72, but you can't go from 72 to 300. So it's just better to start bigger. So I'm going to show you what the pixels look like. Each pixel has a designated color. They may be close in shade just to give a good blending look to the pixel next to them, but they aren't necessarily the same color. So I'm going to give you an example of what happens whenever you have pixels in an image. Now this is a, a little, but this is one of my private photos. It's of one of my cats that was a very dear cat. Um, it has a very defined whisker on this photograph. So I'm going to click, and you see I have enlarged this little square up to this size, and it's probably 1,000, 2,000% magnification. And you can see that the pixels are making it really ragged on the edges. It looks nice and smooth here, but when you blow it up, the pixels don't multiply like 1,000 percent enlargement in magnification of pixels is not going to make the pixels more populous. You're not going to add pixels to the inch. It's just simply making the pixels themselves larger. Because of this, I have a rule that I never use text in Photoshop. Now, some people like to do fancy headlines and that sort of thing with shadows, but I don't find that to be very useful. I can do that in Illustrator just as easily and just as effectively as you can in Photoshop, and you don't have the worry of it being the wrong resolution. Really, the text is really fine as long as you have straight lines, but once you get to a curve, you see this little fuzzy stuff that starts popping up on your text. That's why I don't do text in Photoshop. Now, that does not mean you can't do text in Photoshop because there is certainly a text tool in Photoshop, but sometimes just because you can, you shouldn't. So in this class, we're going to do no text in a photo. Vector, we had that other word. Illustrator is a vector-based program. So if someone asks you for a vector, a vector file, then you're going to know that they want something out of Illustrator. So what is a vector? A vector is it's geometry, really. You've got a point, and we call these points anchors in Illustrator. So we've got a point, and here's a path. That blue line represents a path to another anchor, and here's another path that goes to another anchor, and then the C anchor goes back to the A to complete the path. So no matter how big you make this, if you were to make it the size of a pinhead, it would be clear. If you blew up the same file to be stretching over a mile, it's still going to be clear because vector does not have resolution because it doesn't use pixels. So there's no resolution in Illustrator. So you don't have to worry about setting that sort of thing in Illustrator. It can be big, it can be small. So today in Photoshop, we're going to cover several things. I'm going to show you the settings, how to fix preferences and that sort of thing. I'm going to show you how to open a new document, what the window looks like, how the panels look on the right-hand side, and how to get a new panel should you want it, and to set the tools and that sort of thing, and how to crop and touch up and a few other things that is going to be in the lab. First, though, before I do that, I want to tell you about something that I have in the workbook. In the workbook, this image and this image are there so that you can see up close and personal what these tools are named, and you can see what shortcuts are available right here, which is a very important thing if you're going to become a regular user of the software. So today we are going to mainly work on these tools. We might touch on another tool here and there, but these are the main tools that we're going to be using today. But before we start, I want to say a little bit about file organization. If you're using your own computer, I would advise you to start a system in your files so that you'll be able to find whatever you're working on. I would do this for anything, any class, any project. It doesn't have to be just this class. It's a good habit to have. When you go work for someone else, you're going to find that they're going to have a file system and they're going to expect you to use it as well, because when you're working with these kind of files, they're not just yours. There might be a whole team that has to access these. So don't be that one that can't put anything in the right place. And before we start, I want to also tell you about what the window does. There are workspaces that make certain tools show up. And so on this particular exercise, we're going to use the photography workspace. Essentials may be checked, and that's a good one to use, but in this case, we're going to do the photography workspace. And so here is the lab. I'm going to explain it really quick, but then you can look at the tutorials and you can see that it's pretty straightforward. So I want you to download the files in Google for the photography introduction, and open the folder, and you're gonna work on the image. The name of the file is going to indicate what I want you to do the file. For example, crop and touch up. So you would use the crop tool, and you would, this first one, for instance, you would omit the book pages because it was a Photoshop, it was a file that was shot from a book that was already printed. And so you're going to crop, and then you're going to touch up, and you're going to omit all the book page edges that you can see in the cracks and other blemishes. Okay, on the second one, you're going to crop and touch up. And then you're going to do a levels adjustment and then a brightness adjustment. So, but that's just an example. There are going to be several different things that you're going to be required to do. Okay, the submission requirements. What I want you to do is to have a folder named with Photoshop 1 and your last name, and then put your completed photos into that folder. So if you're using a Mac and you have a right click activated, if you don't have a right click activated, you'll need to use the control, I believe. I'll have to double check that, but it's either a control or option to get a menu to pop up that has the word compress in it. So we're going to compress that folder that you've named with Photoshop 1 and your last name, and it's going to zip it. So you're going to have a second file pop up that has a zipper on the front of it. It literally has that on the front of it. And the zipped file is going to go into Canvas. And then this is going to be due on Sunday at 11:59.